That is a big zit. Look at that. She's definitely cut my hair. Can you guys notice from the videos that I just made a couple days ago how much hair she's cut off my head? I'm guessing she got a few minutes with me, but look how much hair she's cut off already. Are you fucking kidding me? You know, she just can't handle that I just persevere. Anyhow, I just wanted to note how fucked up the dog's eyes look. You see how they're just like this sort of like, they're not clear. The white's not white. And they're kind of glassy, kind of red. Miho's are really bad. But you see how the white's just not white? And then you can look at my eyes and see how red and glassy they are. Yeah, she just keeps cutting my hair. Look at that. Look at that, literally. She's cut more of my hair. She's made this part shorter, and I can feel that there's less hair. She's super addicted to cutting my hair. I guess in some life she thought she was a hairdresser before she became a crackhead, meth head, fucking loser bitch. Okay, so I was thinking as I took the dogs for a little walk, and got out of this environment. First of all, two people showed up that supposedly work for Best Friends. One of them was driving two separate vehicles too. One of them was driving a white work truck that I happened to see the last 2 nights that I went driving around at fucking whatever in the morning to try to escape this shit. And it was 2 white men, and one of them had like an Adopt Me bandana for his face, and they had a little white box that was not that big, and they walked into cabin number 10 and then walked out, and I didn't even hear their vehicles start to leave, which I think is weird. I have the windows open and I'm like, how many feet away? Oh yeah, it's in here. Fuck, can't keep the dogs safe. Anyhow, I know Miho got pretty fucked up last night. They both did. It was a rough night for all of us. But I was thinking, if I could squeeze between you two. Can I squeeze in between you two? I was thinking that I have a little message for these people, because they're the ones that watch this the most. I don't know if anybody else even watches them, but I know they do. So I have a little message for whoever this is, the cartel, the Hawaiian Syndicate, of course, and all their like affiliates. If you have to use this much time, energy, resources, I mean, just this many people to come after me, who prior to the raping and the sodomizing and the torturing, you'd already had me for 10 years, where you were psychologically, you killed my dogs, you poisoned my cat, you were constantly breaking into my homes, no matter where I was, and poisoning me, drugging me, terrorizing me, following me around all the time, putting nails and screws in my tires, preventing me from getting jobs, preventing me from having friendships, spreading rumors and lies everywhere I went, stopping me from being able to do stuff. You'd already done that for 10 fucking years before you started doing all this insanity. Basically breaking my fucking arm and my legs, and I mean, just going after me. It's in here. Whew. I wonder what was in that little white box. I wonder if that is what this is. What is it? Refills for whatever they were doing. Yeah, the guys just seemed shady. I'm not gonna lie. They seemed shady. And, yeah. And I went into that cabin to check it out and see what that little white box was. I didn't see anything different or anything. And what would they be doing? No one's even checking in there tonight. And no one was in there yesterday, and supposedly. You okay? So, anyways, if you have to take all that time and energy to come up against me, someone who's already been beaten down for a decade, gaslit for a decade, and just annihilated, but you still have to use that many fucking people, what do you think your odds are going against somebody who actually has their feet under them? Or two, or five, or 10? I mean, how many thousands of people are you going to need to go up against just a few? Because of how many people you need to come after me. And I'm like nothing. I'm nobody. I'm fucking broken. Like fucking, and you still need that many fucking people to come after me. Yeah, do you ever think about that? Because sometimes I think that this is all just practice for you to prepare for your future going after people who matter. Because, I mean, I don't. No one listens to me. No one gives a fuck about me. You've made sure that I have nobody. Like, I'm alone in this world. I'm fucking being massively gang raped and sodomized and tortured. Like, I'm like a beaten person. And still yet, you need guys to come deliver stuff. And you need to constantly gas the room. And you need, I mean, it's like, you have to go after the rental Jeep. You have to go after my RVs. You have to, like, all of that takes a great deal of relying on all your networks. What are you going to do, like, with somebody who actually is not beaten down? You're going to take a decade to go after each one person. You're going to spend that much time and energy on each one person that may stand in your way. Because I really do foresee this future of you guys having to come up against people who are going to fight you. Like, you have no idea how many people would have just already put a bullet in some of these people's heads. Like, walked over to their neighbors who they knew were helping to gang sodomize and rape them and just killed them. Because not everybody's going to fucking put up with this shit like I did, and fucking be restrained and give a fuck about my own soul over your nasty ass piece of shit ass, like, like, who do you think you're going to go up against? Who do you think you're going to use all this against in the future? You're going to really methodically take decades to undermine people and make sure they have no friends and they're all alone and they can't get any help anywhere. That takes time. I mean, even with me, it took time. Like, for the first 6.5 years, they weren't able to do that in Hawaii. They weren't able to accomplish it completely like they can now. But not everybody was willing to jump on board. Like, not everybody enjoys being approached by people and saying, hey, you know what, don't take that job that's going to pocket you thousands of dollars, and instead, I'll help you out. Like, not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody, especially in Hawaii, I noticed. Like, here on the mainland, it seems like there's a plethora of fucked up people. But in Hawaii, it's so small and everything. Like, not everybody wants to fucking be that guy, and people don't really like to be strong-armed. They don't, and in Hawaii, that happens too much, and people grow up with that mentality of people fucking doing that shit and asking for favors of people, and people don't like that. Especially, like I'll talk about one contractor that I talked to that was Hawaiian, and he was like fucking pissed because here he is being asked by you guys, to sovereignty guys and whatever, to fucking not take a job from me, knowing that I was being cool and that I'd probably be a cool person and that it would be a good job and he'd make money, and and I had the money to give and I would pay him and it wouldn't be problematic. But instead he's being pressured by people, and he had he had stuff to say about the fact that his kids couldn't go to Kamehameha schools because they're this shy of how much blood they need, and just how the resources are being parred out by the Hawaiians, and how they, have this expectation of blood and lineage and all this bullshit, really, and it was harder in Hawaii. My dad is right in the way that, I mean, I would guess I was safer there. I don't know. But when I went back, it was worse. They've just proliferated. They've gotten more connections, with that black dude, that drug dealer hanging out at Manoa Mart on the corner, and and then when he disappeared for a couple weeks, another black dude showed up and he was the guy. And I mean, you know, and they're there because of the Hawaiians. That black dude could not stand on that corner on East Manoa Road and Lowry without the okay and the approval and the placement by the Hawaiian Sovereignty Syndicate, whatever. Couldn't. No way. No way could they walk into Manoa Valley and do that. There's no way. They'd have to be working for them. And it was a bad choice because there's just not that many black people in Manoa. So, and when you're hanging out in the corner, you know, they think that Asian people aren't paying attention because they don't say anything. But believe me, like, I grew up in that valley. Like, they fucking notice everything. You know, they know every single fucking homeless person there, you know, and there's not that many. And when things start getting weird or whatever, they notice and they talk and they weren't happy, you know. So you're going to get pushback, not probably from people like them because it's just too cultural and they've just been, you know, they're not willing to fight. They're too complacent. They want to be left alone and just, you know, and they're not going to get left alone because they're going to keep proliferating these neighborhoods, you know, especially a neighborhood like Manoa where people have means, you know. Although it's not the prime picking, I'm a little surprised that they would go full force in Manoa. It's just the Hawaiians want to create a presence there, I can tell. But the people that don't have, like, I grew up there, and yes, the people that live there have some means, and they're probably sending their kids to private school and all that kind of stuff, but they're not the kind of people in general to, like, lavish out, you know? Whereas like Hawaii Kai, Black Point, Diamond Head, like those are the areas that you're going to want to really proliferate because those are the areas you're going to want to rob. You know, you rob people in Manoa, you're going to get some shit, but you're not going to get what you're going to get in those neighborhoods. They're just not the same kind of people. So anyhow, at some point, people are going to fight back against you. And if this is what you take, this... Like, it's kind of funny when you think about it. You take this much shit. You have to literally dedicate one person, this psychopathic, crazy, crack whore bitch. And she has to enlist all her friends. And then you have to go through all your resources for every mechanic I go to, an RV. And, I mean, you have to rely on all of that for just one person. And one person that you've already severely beaten down. What are you going to do when you come up against somebody real? Like on their 2 feet that has their shit together. You're going to take 10 years for each person. And you think that when you do that and you go to network and you go to cut off all their resources and everything, you're going to come across the ease that you did with me? No, because I'm kind of a loner. Like I'm kind of a like stick to myself, you know, kind of person. So, you know, God, this shit is fucking in the air. And, yeah, you're going to do this to everybody? I would say at least 75% of people would, instead of laying there every night trying to fight not getting raped, would literally just walk next door and beat one of these people to death. You know? Seriously. Like if you touch their wife or their children or their animals. You have no fucking clue what you're doing. Like, you think you're so badass. Like, as I was walking and thinking, like, you're following me, you're pelting shit at me while I'm walking, you're proliferating in here, you're having guys deliver more stuff, and every time I leave town, and every time, go into town, you've got the people at the store not liking me, the rental car people not liking me, the mechanics not liking me. How are you gonna do this to more than one person? And so in the end, you don't accomplish much with me. For the funds that you get out of me that you may not get out of me at some point, it's nothing in the drug trafficking world. You know, maybe to the average person, like to her crack whore friends, it's whoa. But for the people that they're doing this for, it's nothing. Nothing. Like, it's like, you know, it's nothing. It's a mental thing. It's to take from me. It's not to put in their pockets because they don't need it. They don't need it. They make fucking tons of money off of raping women and children and dealing fucking drugs to their stupid people that are doing this to me. You know, like these people that are out there fucking me up, and for them are all fucking drug users for the most part that I've noticed since I've been here on the mainland. And they're the ones that are destroying their own lives, their relationships with their families by robbing them and to support their drug habits so they can put money out of their own family's pocket into the pockets of drug traffickers that are literally taking their lives and destroying any relationships they have with anybody that they could truly trust or that would truly care about them. It's a little bit comical, and I see bad things coming for them. I see them not winning as much as they think they're going to win. And that this whole thing is not as much practice for other people as that it's really going to be, you know? Like, no. Like, the drugs do fuck with your head, but I'm still perfectly capable of going and fucking killing somebody. Like, I'm still clear on being able to do that and who I would go after. So what are you going to do again with somebody that like, you're never going to win against normal people. Like people that you haven't spent decades. So you'd have to spend decades on each person. And then you'd have to go after them super hard. And in that time period, you're going to assume that they're never going to come after you hard. Like, especially these fucking drug addicts. You think how many people would fucking come out and see all those fucking raping, fucking stealing, stank ass pieces of shit by their fucking vehicle? You think that they would just fucking drive away? Oh, hell no. I mean, I would say there's just even a large percentage of people would take that bus and fucking run them all over and not give a fuck and go to court and be like, these motherfuckers were doing this, 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 and this. And in order to discredit them, you'd have to have spent years doing that already. Because that's what it took with me. And I didn't even have that much of a foothold, Like, people liked me. I was not known as a bad person. I didn't have any reputation in Hawaii as being a fucked up person. Like, that's why that first 6.5 years wasn't super easy for them. Because it wasn't like I was this person that there was a ton of people hated. I wasn't. I've never been that person, because I'm just not a fucked up person. I didn't make a ton of enemies in Hawaii. There wasn't this laundry list of guys that had come and done work at my house and I had fucked them over, and no, none, So, like, you had Brian Cam, and he was good. Brian Cam is good. But even him, he spent years discrediting me and gaslighting me to the other neighbors. Like, years of and when I went back, he was doing the same thing with Mrs. Chang right across the street. Mrs. Chang and I were always cool. I remembered I always, knew her husband, felt really bad when he died. Her son or grandson that was all fucked up or fucked up because her own kids were fucked up and had to live there, but he kept crashing all the super nice, speedy vroom vroom vehicles that they were buying for him. And I know all about, I don't forget this kind of stuff. Like, I'm a nice person that, will get to know people and think about them. And they, she brought me over boiled peanuts and, but Brian Cam went to town on her. Like, I'd see him out there talking to her, and she'd look over at my house, and he would, and he did the same thing to Wayne and Jane so that they would forget about seeing people coming into my home and parking in my fucking driveway, and but still, even with Brian Cam's skills of being all, I'm super local, but I'm also at the same time, like, there are people that weren't fucking buying his shit. A lot of people did, for sure, because they're dumb and they're stupid, or they wanted the benefit of it. That was probably a lot of it, like that realtor, who was like, oh, your neighbors are nice. I'm like, okay, whatever. Sure, Brian's nice. But, there are going to be some people that would be thinking, what is a 60-something-year-old man going out of his way to talk shit about his neighbor constantly? Like, there are going to be people that have that intelligence and just that gut feeling where they're going to be like, this seems odd. You know what I mean? Like, she's not going around and taking any of her time to go and trash Brian in the neighborhood, or his psycho son or her psycho wife. Like I didn't fucking spend a shit ton of time fucking going after him and like talking about what a fucking psychopath he is and his whole fucking family, And there's other people that might also just kind of look at the outside in like I did with him, which is he left his dog tied to a post for 8 years until it died and claimed it was for protection, which is really stupid because if you tie a dog to a post on a short leash and it barks 24/7 almost, well, at least 16 hours a day, it's not really good protection because it's barking all the time, so you wouldn't really notice if somebody was there. And anybody can break into the house that can just get around the 4-foot chain. So they might have noticed that. They might notice that yes, he takes very good care of his yard, and that's very impressive in the Asian community in Manoa. However, what was weird about it is that he was so anal about it. He was so fucking anal about it, but yet he never spent any time in his yard, like just hanging out, like just enjoying all his hard labor and everything. And everything was not loved, it was just maintained to look a certain way. It's all about having face and having an appearance and having a facade, you know? But if you really talk to him, you could really sense his like, and especially if you said anything, I'm sure if anybody said anything where he didn't agree with it, you'd immediately sense that fucking anger and hatred and just, and also like their, happiness was so false. Like I literally can say, and I would probably bet my life on the fact that Frances Cam has never in her life ever been happy. She just doesn't, and I got to, of course, see the sour side of her because, once I wrote them a letter after I moved in and said, hey, you know what, your dog is barking all the time and I'm working 2 jobs and I need my sleep. And, I tried to be cool and write a letter and because I felt like that might go better. And, that's not local style because I'm not, even though I was local, I, had my own style of dealing with things. But that's very howly, very mainland, to write a letter instead of try to talk. But for me, I that's how I wanted to approach it. And of course, then after they sent me a letter back saying basically to go fuck myself. And it was an angry letter. And it was like, this dog protects our property. We're the only ones that haven't been robbed. And I'm thinking, you're the only ones that haven't been robbed because you fucking know all the criminals. Like, it's not because your fucking dog is tied to a post with 4 feet of chain. You know what I mean? Like, and your other neighbor on the other side, she was being robbed by all her own friends. Because every time she got robbed, it was after her New Year's celebration where they pounded poi and she has this big thing and everything. And then within a few weeks, she always got robbed. Always. And I told her straight up at some point, I was like, it's the people that were at your party. I don't mean to be a dick and I'm not trying to be an asshole, but like you had a bunch of people over there, like a shit ton, and not all of them looked like good people. And I didn't say all that, but I was like, because she was like, it's weird. They knew specifically where to go and what to get. And I'm like, because they were already in there. So anyways, and Brian and Francis never had any friends. Ever. I never, ever saw them in the 20 years that I owned that property ever entertain anybody. Ever. For a barbecue, for anything. It's just those things I think possibly other people noticed. You know what I mean? That they just, they're just not cool people. Psychos. Total psychos. So, I did say to Brian Cam, I know you know who killed my dogs, and he did laugh in my face and say, prove it. So, but I also know when it first started, he didn't want to be a part of it. As much as he didn't like me, he still didn't, because that's the kind of guy he is. It's like he doesn't want to be put out, by anybody, including syndicate guys. Now, when I went back, his son had already been all super involved in it, so I think that he just sort of, and then the psycho bitch went over there and met with him and used her little like, look, I look like a little child. Don't look at my face. It's all old and ugly. But, we're going to do all this crazy stuff to her. You're never going to see her again. Blah. It's like, I already come back to sell my house. You didn't need psycho bitch to make that happen. In fact, it took longer. And it took more police reports. And it took me walking into police stations and dropping your fucking name when I got raped. So it didn't really work out the best for you and your nutcase son. Bryant Cam, by the way, sit him down with a fucking federal agent that has an ounce of integrity and an ounce of intelligence. They will know he's a psychopath like that. Because I moved in there, he was young and he was weird then. He just, and they're just not nice people. They just really aren't. And they spend a lot of time creating an image. But it's not, it's all bullshit. So, and you just kind of got to look at their life from the, take a step back and you can totally see. So, but see, you had to use people like him. And oh yeah, so in the beginning, he wasn't like super into it. Like I remember one time they took the screen off and he actually said to me, "Oh, your screen is off." Like he wasn't stoked because he understood that if they're coming in on his side of the house, that in that area that they can clearly see anybody coming in and out, that puts him in a bad position. That they're putting him. At that point, he realized that they were the ones putting him in the bad position. That when they showed up that night, when I fled my house in Kool-Aid Track, when I fled the house right next door, Mark and Nathalie Walker, that had this psychopathic Hawaiian that went after me, that started this whole thing, who got so mad at me talking about his friends who raped, murdered, sodomized, and tortured Dana Ireland, which is why they're doing this to me now. It really did connect with this. Like, they wanted me to go through what Dana went through, but live and have to do it over and over and over again. I mean, there's a very strong connection with that. But that night I fled, and they didn't know I was going to leave that night. I didn't know I was going to leave that night until an hour before, and I literally packed up my shit, a futon, threw it in, and drove back to my house in Manoa. And lo and behold, who was standing in Brian Cam's living room when I went through the house to make sure that nobody was in there? Because I was freaked out. They followed me while I was driving, screamed at me, and then took off and were ahead of me. And I knew where they were heading, to my house. So I was checking out the house and I was in my front bedroom and I looked over out the window and he was standing right in Brian Cam's living room, staring at me like he wanted to slit my fucking throat. So, but I'm guessing that was pretty big imposition. Like, I'm sure they had already gone to Brian at that point and asked him, "What's this chick about? Like, who the fuck is this?" Like, because he's one of those guys that you could go to. I'm guessing when he was working at Hawaiian Airlines, no, Aloha Cargo, that he probably was one of those guys that looked the other way when the big package of methamphetamine came in. I would guess so, you know? So I think they already knew him, and he's just that kind of guy that you could approach, where you couldn't approach Wayne and Jane. You couldn't approach Mrs. Chang. You couldn't approach Mr. Nagoshi. Like, you couldn't do that with those people, but you could approach him. And so they did. But I'm guessing from the way that it felt at the beginning, that he was not stoked on them coming to him for that, because it put him in a bad position. He was worried about the other neighbors knowing that he was involved. He was worried about the cops knowing that he was involved. Like, he wasn't stoked. As much as he might have enjoyed the thought of me being tortured and terrorized and all that stuff, he wasn't stoked on it. Not like when I came back. And then he was fucking stoked. He had gotten more evil. His son had grown into a psychopathic grown person. Yeah. Not good. And I think about that. And I go back to the fact that every time that this psycho bitch comes in contact with somebody, their lives get worse. Their psyche goes downhill. They become bigger criminals than they were before she walked into their life. And they're too dumb to see it. Like, Brian wasn't seeing this. Like, at first I could tell he was pissed off. Because I literally said to them, because they were like, "Oh, you're back." And they obviously didn't like the tenants I had and probably were thinking, well, she was better than that, because I never have people over. I was a predictable person. I usually was pretty considerate about the fact that I would try to keep things quiet after 10 p.m. because I knew all my neighbors were like old and retired. And I did that since I first moved in at 27. So I was being a conscious person, But I turned to him and I said, when he tried to be nice to me, him and Francis, I was like, "Just so you know, if you keep fucking with me, like, since I've been, now that I'm back and I'm fucking leaving, so whatever, like, I will call the feds on you." And I have called the feds on you, and I've already told them your name. And the look on their faces was like, and I'm like, yeah, Like, you know, not just HPD knows the name Brian Cam and Francis Cam and Bryant Cam. You know, I told federal agents in 2 different states, 3 different states. So, but he just chose, you know, they chose, and it's because his son was already doing stuff with them. And I think that then he found out, this is how I guess it happened, is they approached Bryant first, and he was helping them with the surveillance stuff and doing all that shit, because all of a sudden he was showing up there all the time, and he lived somewhere else. But when I moved back, he was there all the time. And different from when I got back and my tenants were living there, and different from when I was still having my house fixed before I got back in. But as soon as I moved back in, then Bryant was there all the time. And so I'm guessing this is how it worked. They went to Bryant first and got him all involved, and then they all approached Brian and Francis, and I bet you there was resistance at first, because that's the feeling I got, that he was just super unstoked, that, you know, had what I had said about the feds put him in a position of feeling afraid about that. But people like her got in his head and talked to him because of the way he looked at me when he thought I was her, like all flirtatious and gross. That's one of the people they used to get in his head. And but look, he went then from being a neighbor who was really just for the most part turning a blind eye to what was going on, to someone who's actually facilitating the rape, sodomy, and torture of his neighbor, and torturing animals. Instead of just being like happy that my dogs died, he was participating in it. And when I went in to talk to the rape detective, the sex detective in Hawaii, I talked about Brian Cam. And I said, look, he knows what, him and his son and his wife know what the fuck's going on, and they're helping by and providing surveillance for me to get raped. I said, is that facilitation of rape? And the guy said, yes, it is. I said, is that a crime? And he said, yes, it is. So see, this is what I've known and what I've noticed since this crazy bitch in the last 2 years has gotten involved in this situation, is that every time she comes into contact, like take her friends in Eugene, Oregon, they were meth addicts, heroin addicts who undoubtedly have committed crimes against other people, assaults probably, robbery mostly, theft, all those other things. But after hanging out with her for those few days in Eugene, they no longer were those type of criminals, those level of criminals. Now, they're actually criminals who have participated in gang raping, gang sodomizing, drugging a woman. Like, that's a huge difference in criminality. So every time she comes into somebody's life, their life gets worse. Seriously. And even criminals understand this and recognize this, because they understand that they can go rob somebody and do this and that. And they'll get, a lot of the times, fucking nothing. Barely anything in prison. But they also know that if they get caught fucking being